Welcome to the Women Leaders Association podcast, where we believe we go further, faster, and have more fun when we go together. Be sure to tune in each week to hear an empowering message from the world's top women executives, trailblazers, entrepreneurs, and all-around fierce female leaders. I'm your host, Julia Kirkland, and I will be taking you on a deep dive of each message to equip you with the principles, strategies, and tools you need to start crushing your goals, increasing your impact, creating work-life harmony, and did I mention have more fun? Because when you love what you do it better. The Women Leaders Association is the world's largest women executives association with over 30,000 women in executive and leadership positions who are committed to the development and advancement of women in the corporate arena. If you would like to get involved in a Women Leaders Association chapter, would enjoy daily podcasts, or you desire to become a part of the Women's Mastermind group near you, simply go to womenleaderspodcast.com. Now let's tune in for this incredible message. Julia Stewart is the founder and CEO of Alurx. She is on mission to enable wellness for all. As a member of Fortune magazine's list of top 50 most powerful women in the US, Julia has built and grown successful brands for over 40 years. She has climbed the ladder up to executive leadership for companies like Taco Bell, Applebee's, IHop, and Dime Brands Global Inc. Julia has always understood the benefits of maintaining a balance between body, mind, and spirit, and holds this philosophy as the foundation of her endeavors. In 2020, Julia launched Alurx to offer health-conscious individuals with a consistent, proven line of wellness-based solutions that can be personalized to match their goals. I mean, how amazing. It's information developed and curated by the AMEC, which is Alurx Medical and Expert Council. And they have joined forces as a giving back partner to the Seek Her Foundation as they amplify advocacy for women's health, research, and support for women changemakers who are making a difference in their local communities. Welcome, Julia. Woohoo!
Thank you so much.
Yes, we're so excited to have you here. Okay, Julia, take us back to when you were that waitress in the IHop. Like, let's go back. Take us back there. Start there. Tell us about that.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's just a pleasure. And I wish I could see the women that were on the screen, but know that I am there in spirit. I started as a food server at an IHop in San Diego, California, very young in high school. And instantly, I think what I liked about it more than anything was that every day was sort of special and unique, and you were getting feedback every day from customers. It was very much a family environment, and I loved it. And I think I instantly grew sort of attracted to this notion of a servant leadership. And that really stuck with me my whole career. But yes, you can picture me in the apron with the hat and the IHop cufflinks on the old-fashioned syrup containers and the like. But it was a great start to an industry.
Yeah. I mean, and really how foreshadowing. I mean, you get into some sticky situations as a leader, right? So dealing with that syrup every day, it definitely helped to kind of get you ready, get you prepared. So what are some of the things that inspired you as that woman who now realizes, okay, servant leadership, I'm all about it, right? So what were some of the first things that you started to really lean into to grow yourself to become this woman that we have before us today?
So I think it probably started long before being a food server for IHop, but I think early on, this notion of taking on leadership, which to me is a privilege. I mean, it's really a privilege to be able to lead. But throughout my college years, I worked in the restaurant business. And I think by the time I graduated from college, I knew someday I wanted to lead something. So my first 18 years of my career was all in marketing for restaurant companies. I'll talk more about that later. But this notion of learning, growing, being the best I could be, and back in those days, being the best I could be meant probably being twice as good as my male counterparts. But it was really always just being the best I could be. I hit the glass ceiling a lot in those early years because I would get to a certain pinnacle and then people would say, look, you're about as high as you can go. So I did sort of back then the unthinkable, which is I kept moving because I believed the only way I could truly get what I wanted to do was to continue to leave organizations and keep learning and growing. And luckily for me, each time I left and went somewhere else, I would get more responsibility, more accountability. But that career path, that journey for me was arduous only because, you know, you'd start getting comfortable and you'd start feeling good about where you were. And I'd walk in and say, okay, I've done all these things. And someone would say, well, that's about as good as it's going to be. Or they would say things like, well, you're the highest ranking female here, which was always sort of but I think along the way, it was this notion that I really wanted to run something. And after 18 years in marketing, I began to realize no one was going to make me a CEO or a president without P&L experience. So I actually did the unthinkable. And after 18 years in great marketing positions, by then I'm vice president of marketing. I have a huge staff. I decided to quit and I got a job, which is a great story in and of itself, at Taco Bell as an advanced management recruit, which back in those days meant they would take people from different lots in life, put them in an advanced management recruiting program, which is a nice way of saying they put you in operations. So I started as an assistant manager of a Taco Bell, worked my way up, and 4 years later, I was running the country for operations. However, I will tell you, that was being at the right place at the right time and demonstrating capability. I always thought it was rather funny that people would say, well, you know, she's a marketing person. How could she possibly be in operations? I'm like, well, it's the same basic principle. You have to lead, manage, hold people accountable. I always thought that was kind of funny. But at any rate, ended up doing operations so that I could garner P&L experience, operating experience, which is really what you need to be a well-rounded CEO.
Wow. Julia, did you have any kind of mentor or somebody that was coming alongside of you to like help guide you through this journey? Or were you like, you know what, I'm just going to go for it?
Yeah, in those days, I guess I'm showing my age, but certainly in the late 70s and 80s, there were no female leaders. So there was nobody to look to. There was no familiar face. And I say this respectfully, there was really no incentive for a man to mentor me. What was the incentive? So there really wasn't a lot of mentoring back then. We didn't call it that back then. But there were very few people that would be willing to help or guide. I think more than that, and this will be maybe unpopular, Julianne, but it was really just watching and learning and listening what I didn't want to be.
Yeah.
I think you learn more in those days from people's mistakes and watching men in executive positions make mistakes. And that was how I sort of learned. I learned by watching, listening, and sort of mentally saying to myself, I don't want to be like that, or I don't want to do that. So I think it was more of that back then than it was anything. Lots changed today, but there wasn't really that person who put their arm around me and said, let me give you some helpful hints.
Yeah. Wow. It's so true. We learn so much by watching other people and deciding, you know, oh, this is what I don't want to do. And here's the thing, like, we don't have to take a spirit of offense with that.
No.
You know, like today, so many people want to get offended if you don't want to do it some way. That's fine. You can do it your way. I just know that for me and what I'm building, it doesn't have to be this certain way. So I love that you did that you took that on all on your own. Besides, you know, being this woman arising in a pretty much male dominated arena, what are some other challenges you had as you were now becoming this director over the country in Taco Bell? Like, what was that like for you?
So in the early days, sexual harassment was a huge deal. I think the lower you were on the ladder, the more likely you were. And in my world, because I was in the restaurant business, a lot of that would happen at dinners at night. People would drink. And we all have those stories. And I've told a million of those and I've heard a million of those. So I'm not unique in any way, shape, or form. But I think the challenge for me was more about, I would take the job nobody else wanted. I would do the risky thing that nobody else wanted to do. I would go the places nobody else wanted to go. I have stories driving down the freeway on Highway 5 in California, going from restaurant to restaurant because nobody else wanted it. But I do think those challenges were more me raising my hand saying I wanted to do more. I could do more. I could take on more responsibility. But there just really wasn't any, well, why would I do that? I got Bob over here that's, been doing it longer than you. So I think I began to realize that I was going to have to be twice as good as anyone else to go where I needed to go. And it was going to create its fair share of issues. And I was going to rattle some people because just candidly, there were no women and there were no people of color at all. It was just a white man's world. And, I get asked all the time, well, how's that going to get resolved, Julia? I'm like, candidly, until it's about equal in boardrooms across America and in executive teams across America, you are going to have somewhat of a jaded issue for a lot. Now, listen, there are a lot of what I call, enlightened men out there, but I still think there's a long way to go in terms of people feeling like they had to push. So I was considered an aggressive, assertive a woman, and not everybody appreciated that. So that's the reality. And you make a choice whether you are okay with that or you're not okay with that. And clearly I was okay with that, right? It's like, okay, I'm an aggressive, assertive female. But as you get, the one comment I want to make though, is you get older and you get into more executive positions, it's not sexual harassment anymore. It's all the subtleties, and those are alive and well. The subtleties are there every day. Yeah. The comments, the innuendos, the forgetting to copy you on something, it's all innuendos, and it's still alive and well. It's getting better, but it's by no way, shape, or form gone. And I could do all the right things as a female CEO for 20 years, but make no mistake about it, those subtleties are still alive and well.
Oh, absolutely. We're seeing some things coming in the comment, and just drop in the comments if you are one of those rattlers, you are one of those assertive leadership people coming in, one of those enlightened men. I know we have some men here from the CEO Club who know just our stand-up character, and we're so excited to have you here. What do you find, Julia, is some of like the core principles and leadership values that you have encompassed and that you encourage other leaders to also embrace?
Yeah, I can just tell you what worked for me and what I valued the most. And, these may sound contrived, but that was my journey. So early on, I found being transparent and honest worked for me. Yeah. And it didn't work for everybody, but it certainly worked for me, just being truthful and sincere. I once had a boss early on who told me that my management style was just exhausting because I cared too much. And I always thought that was like, I've kind of wore that with a badge. Like, I think that's wonderful. Yeah. And I was getting a performance appraisal, which was unheard of back then. And he literally said to me, you're exhausting. You care too much about your people. And I always thought that was a badge of honor. But at any rate, I would say honesty, transparency. I'm a big believer in pay it forward in whatever way I can. So I've done that my entire career, much more as an executive, because you have the wherewithal and the capabilities and the space and time to do that. When you're climbing that ladder, it's much more difficult. But I do think that was important to me, paying it forward. And then I learned early on that giving people feedback is a gift. Now, there are many people who don't like that feedback, who don't like the gift. True. And, my point was always, if you don't want to get better and you don't want the feedback, I don't know what to tell you, right? Ultimately, you're going to hit your own ceiling. But I really believed I never had it as I was going through my career. So I promised myself, one of the things I learned early on that I didn't like was that you wouldn't get feedback. It was sort of this blind, how am I doing? You're doing great. I'm not sure what that means. What can I work on? So that became important to me. And I guess the other value that's partially personal and partially business related is tenacity. I just don't give up ever.
I love it. Yeah.
So I just don't give up. And it's a curse and a blessing, if I'm being candid with you, because when you don't give up, you never give up, regardless, even if you fail. And then I guess the last thing for me along the way is failing is important, and I would fail quickly and move on. I think this ability to learn and grow is very important. I was raised that way. I believe in it. Learn quickly, grow quickly, move on. And there's just a lot of people out there who don't really appreciate that value.
Yeah, that's right. And Arlene just said, failure provides great learning lessons. Absolutely. It does. It teaches you, those valley lows will teach you things that mountain highs never will.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Man, that is so great. So all right. You're over Taco Bell, and like, what happens next in your journey? Because you're like, I'm still climbing. This isn't all for me. So what happens next for you? What makes you go, there's some more?
For those in corporate America on the call, they will relate to this. When you become the heir apparent to the CEO, and you're told that you're a shining star and you're a beacon and you're going to be incredibly successful, and you are next in line, you're the successor to the CEO. I was thrilled, and I loved the CEO of Taco Bell. And for those of you who don't know the story, I'll tell it briefly. Pillsbury, Pillsbury. Good, Julia. That's the other company that you work for. PepsiCo.
She's like, I work for so many.
Yeah. PepsiCo owned several companies back then: KFC, Pizza Hut, Taco Bell. It also had obviously lots of business in bottling and manufacturing. It decided to spin off those three restaurants into its own company, which today is known as Yum. So most people know it that way. But back then, we were still owned by Pepsi, and there was this rumor that we were going to spin off. And John, who was then my boss at Taco Bell, who was the CEO, was going to become the CEO of all of Yum. So I tell the story. We all got called in one morning to a hotel room off premise, which was odd back then. And we all got called into a hotel room. And I thought, well, this is it, right? This is my big moment. Better dress up because this is it. And we get in there, and it's a very short meeting. And he says, look, I didn't get the job. I thought I would, but they made a different choice. And they went with David, who was then the CEO of KFC. So I'm leaving. And I remember thinking, well, surely if you're number two and you're doing all the right things, you're going to be the right person. But what became very clear and very apparent is, just because you're seen by him as the heir apparent, I lost sort of some of my cachet, and ultimately they went another direction and did not replace me with him. And I thought, well, I'll make it work. My tenacity, I'm at the peak of my power, and I'm certainly doing all the right things. And I think after 2 years, it became apparent to me, they just weren't going to put a woman in that position. And, we can all argue I shoulda, woulda, coulda, but I made the choice that it was time to be open-minded. And about that time, I got an executive recruiter call to be the president of Applebee's. And so I left. And I know a lot of people thought that was crazy, that it would just be eventual. But again, my journey is different than anybody else's. That was my journey. And I felt strongly about moving on. Yeah.
So when you were, moving on and taking these bigger roles each time, and you had talked a little bit about how you would have these teams under you that you were leading. And again, you loved and cared about them so much. Talk a little bit into that, like what it was like for you on a personal level with people that you had grown to really love and care about.
Well, sometimes it's painful. Whether you're letting somebody go or giving them tough feedback or caring too much, that's just me. I mean, that's not about being a woman. That's just my leadership style. And I've had that conversation with many a person. That's just who I was. And it's always going to be me. I like it that way. I'm most comfortable that way. I like caring about you. I like knowing about you and your dogs and your kids. It's just who I am. And I don't want to change. So, I mean, I guess you could, but I would say 95% of the time it served me well, Julianne, and 5% of the time it's painful because people disappoint you. It's the nature of the beast. But I guess for me, I'll take that 5% disappointment any day because I'd much rather care about you. And that's not about breeding loyalty, by the way. That's just about my management style. It's not about expecting something in return.
That's good.
And sometimes you would get somebody who I ran into a guy the other day in an airport I had not seen in 30 years. I made him manager of the year, and he was wearing the watch, the gold watch I gave him. And he said, you changed my life. And,
Oh,
those kinds of things give you a moment of gratitude, but
yeah.
not about me, but about him. So
Yeah.
it served me well. It still has.
That's good. This common thread that I'm seeing in your journey that you're sharing with us is you continue to, no matter what, show up authentically. Like you went all in with everything that you are, who you are, and you went all in. And I think so often in today's world, and this cancel culture that we're experiencing, there is that timidity of, oh no, if I show up fully, bright and bold and courageous, then I'm going to be told I'm too much and, turned down. And you've just been setting the stage for women like us to just come out and say, you know what? Okay, here I am.
And, I used to say pretty much throughout my career, you don't sell your soul for any company. So if you have to sell your soul to work somewhere, you should not work there. Yeah. So I've told 1 million people, and I spoke at a conference recently, and I got a standing O for saying, if you work for a company where they don't care about your development and they don't care about you, anybody in America who wants a job has a job. So you can leave and go somewhere else. I'm a big believer that the culture is critical. And if you work for a company that doesn't care about you or your personal development and growth, you're probably working for the wrong company. And I said to you before, corporate America is not for everybody. I mean, let's cut to the chase. I know you have a lot of women on this call who are in corporate America, but it isn't for everybody.
It's true.
There's a million ways to skin that cat. So I'm a big believer in you have to find that niche for you. And I can't tell you how many people I would say, this is not a good fit here. This is not for you. Yeah. You belong as a consultant or in a small company, or you don't like this world. And this world is not for everybody. And I decided I wanted to conquer that world, but make no mistake about it. It isn't for everybody.
That's so true. And you, in saying that to somebody, really is serving them again as the best way. You talked before about how being a leader also means that you're a teacher. So talk a little bit about that philosophy and what that means.
Yeah, I grew up that way. I grew up an only child of 2 teachers. And early on, my dad used to say to me, there's only one noble profession in this world, and that's teaching. So if you don't teach, then you're really not very special at all. And so I always learned, we would come down to breakfast every morning and I would have to have learned a word and share it. Right. I mean, that was just my world. That was the world I grew up in. It was all about teaching, making a difference. So by the time I went to work for Taco Bell, my dad was mortified that I had gotten this college degree and here I was in the restaurant business, and what a horrible profession to be in. I should be in teaching. And so back in those days, part of my territory, this was early on, was South Central LA. And I had my dad meet me. I love this story, in South Central LA. And remember, this is a man who's not excited about me being in operations in restaurants. And so we spent the day touring restaurants, and I just had him shadow me. I would introduce him, and then we would just do what needed to get done. And literally at the end of the day, my dad said, you do teach. You just don't do it in a classroom. And I'm like, that's right, Pop. I teach every day. I coach, I mentor, I help people make a difference. It's just that I don't do it in a classroom. And from that day on, thankfully, before my father passed away, he saw me in a different light and realized I do teach. I just don't do it in a classroom. So that's a very important, it was a life lesson for me, but it's also this ability to mentor and coach. I personally think the ability to transfer skill set and knowledge is really amazing. Now, maybe I'm not as good as others, but I do believe in the idea of teaching and coaching. And you can choose not to take that from me, but goodness, I'm not sure why you wouldn't, right?
Right. Well, and two, like being a leader is always teaching as well. And it's also always being a student. Yeah. Like you said, you were always learning and seeing, okay, what can I improve on? And I think that's so powerful for everybody who is listening today is, like what Julia was saying, even if she didn't have somebody, arm in arm with her saying, okay, we're going to go this way. This is the plan. Here's the strategy. We're going to map it out. Now there's a coach for everything. And so, but you really had that instinct and that tenacity to look at what was going to serve you and who you wanted to become, like what learning was going to serve that mission well.
Honestly, I have never in my entire life had somebody say no. So if I would always approach people, and I did this from the day I graduated from college, and my first job, which was in an in-house advertising agency, and I had no idea what I was doing. Sorry, but I didn't. And I remember going to some radio rep and saying, now, how do you buy radio? Because they didn't teach us that in the marketing classes in college. And he's like, if you take me out to lunch, I'll explain it to you. I'm like, that's done. And from that day forward, I realized, it's a true story. I realized, if you ask people, can you help me? I don't get it. I don't understand it. I don't have any background. And I could tell you story after story after story, the simple to the very serious. It made a huge difference. I remember going to Lehman Bank before they went bankrupt, saying, look, gentlemen, I've heard this thing called securitization. It's a way of financing. I don't understand it. Will you teach that to me? I've never had somebody say, Julie, I just don't have time for you today. Or, that's just everyone always says, well, of course, because they have knowledge and you ask nicely and you tell them when it's convenient for you, I want to learn. This morning, I was learning. My payroll is at Silicon Valley Bank. I want it removed. How do I do that? Someone explained it to me. I think, and I do think as you get older, but for me, it was just a part of my personality from the early on, it's okay to ask, you're beyond the reality. And I think asking and saying, I honestly don't understand this. I don't get it. I would love your coaching. I've never had anyone ever say no to me. Ever. That's personally awesome. Or professionally.
Yeah.
Never.
Diane said, respect is key in all aspects of life. And that's, you showed up with respect, and I'm sure you honored and edified where they were in their position. That matters. It's great.
Yeah. But like I said, I've had people be a little bit, guarded. Sure. But, well, why are you asking?
Right.
I've never had anybody flat out say, no, I won't help you. Because if you think about it, at the end of the day, I really am wanting to learn from you. Will you teach me? And I've never had anyone say no.
Awesome. I love that. That's so good. So, okay. Once again, top of corporate ladder. And then you say, I want to try something else. Enter Alurx.
Yeah, well, I'd like for you to say it was that kind, but it wasn't. So my journey has its downfalls. So I took the job at Applebee's, and I'm not telling you a secret. I've talked about this before. I took that job because I thought I was going to be there a very long time. Loved the company, loved the people. And so I'm really proud of the team I built, because it was bringing in a lot of new people to really grow this business, which had not grown in a really long period of time. And it sort of sat there. And I put the best team together. I was so proud of everyone. They came from all different walks of life. And I was kind of proud of myself for stealing them from other companies, because it was this promise of a great future. And so this is a true story. After 3 years of just working night and day, I went in to the then chairman and said, okay, I'm ready to become CEO. I was president for 3 years, but that was the deal. I was going to turn around the company. And once I and the team turned around the company, doubled the stock price, increased sales dramatically, did everything right, then I would be promoted to CEO. So I tell the story. I took my graph. I'm big on graphs. I took my graph in that started here and, went up and walked in and said, okay, I think it's probably time. And he said, no. And I thought he meant not no today. And I said, well, no, I wasn't suggesting today, but is there something I can do? Can I demonstrate more capability to you or the board? And he said, no, not never. And I said, can you tell me why? And he said, I don't need a reason. And I went home and I thought long and hard about it. And I came back the next day and said, I think I should leave, because it's clear for whatever reason, you don't see me as a successor. And he said, well, you can't leave. If you leave, the stock will tank. So lot of conversation.
A lot of conversation happened in that room.
A lot of conversation. And ultimately we came to an agreement. I left, did the right thing by me and my family. And the rest, as they say, is history. I was interviewing at several different places. And International House of Pancakes was interviewing. And that was a company that was having a tough time. I said I would take the job if I had a CEO and writing title and the responsibility and the accountability. It wasn't about the title. It was what went with it. Yeah. And I was interviewing and 9/11 happened and I got stuck in a hotel in a foreign city. And by then we had cell phones. And I actually remember this like it was yesterday. The chairman of the board called me and he said, "Are you safe? Are you okay?" And I said, "Yes, I'm fine. I'm in a hotel room. I can't go anywhere." And he said, "If you don't mind me asking, where are you?" And I said, "I'm in Calabasas, California." And he said, "Well, there's only one company there and you should not work for them. You should work for us." And I said, "Well, sir, I actually don't have an offer, but thank you so much." And he said, "Well, you will, and you should." And I said, "Gosh, I can't believe he said, "We're calling all of our team members that are traveling today to make sure they're safe." And I remember thinking, that's a place I can live long and prosper. Yeah. And so that was I was there 20 years. So wow. It was a culture where I knew they cared about people, and they do and did. And he died probably a year and a half later. So we lost him, but the legacy of him and the company lived on. And I tell that story because it was important to me. I think we were all so emotional then. I was trying to figure out how I was going to explain to my young children, there are bad people in this world, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't, go on and believe. Right. And I had all my own emotions going on. Of course, I'm stuck with 100 of my closest friends in a Marriott courtyard. And I look back on that now, and that was a deciding moment for me that he called to say, "Are you safe?" It's a great story. It's a true story.
It really is. Oh, it really is. Yeah. Let us know in the chat if you've ever had somebody come alongside you and your company that has just encouraged you. It's so empowering, to let us keep moving forward. I love that. Yeah. So when did you get the entrepreneur bug? Like, when did that happen? Let's get there. I'm very excited about it.
So you have to understand, in the business that I was in, yes, whether it was on the marketing side or the operations side or then general management, I was always working with franchisees. That was my career. So at Burger King and Taco Bell, IHop, Applebee's, I probably in total worked with, had to be thousands, not hundreds, thousands, made many people multimillionaires. Was an honor and a privilege to work with them because you're not really working. You're a leader of sorts, but they need you and you need them, and it doesn't work. And so all my life, so the good news is all my life I had been in these win-win sort of strategies. You got to work together to make it work. And I really, really, really liked it. I enjoyed that. I always have. People thought that I was always told by reporters, well, that's because you're a woman and you're a woman and you like that ability to be an ombudsman. I'm like, I don't think that has anything to do with it. I just really genuinely like that side of the business. But thank you for sharing.
Oh, thank you.
So, but my whole career was about helping entrepreneurs. They're entrepreneurs, make money, grow their businesses, and be successful. So that's the good side. The bad side is, I spent my whole career in what we call everyday indulgent brands. That's a nice way of saying I gave you too much sugar. I gave you too much salt. I gave you too much portion size. I gave you too much fat. And I always heard my dad's voice ringing, make sure you're making a difference in people's lives, Julia, because at the end of the day, giving them a French fry, he thought that was limiting. And there's probably some truth to that. So after 20 years, quarter to quarter earnings, 4,000 restaurants, 250,000 employees worldwide, it's grueling. It's hard on you and hard on your family. And so I decided it was time to do something else. I took some time off. The phone started ringing and I didn't know any better. Before I knew it, I guess I was a consultant. I just didn't. These people were paying me a ridiculous amount of money and I would coach them and teach them what needed to get done and then they wouldn't do it. And so I remember after a year waking up one day and saying, I don't like doing this because you're paying me to tell you what to do, and then you don't do it. Who does that? It's like, who does that? So anyway, I stopped being a consultant, and I decided I would start my own company. And I did what I'd always done my whole life, which was consumer research. So I went out and did some research, first some qual, then some quant, trying to understand what did people like and dislike about their health and wellness structure. And I found this consistent theme, which was, I don't have anything personalized. I don't trust. I have to look everywhere for the information. I don't have a plan. The medical profession is really not proactive. I'm nowhere. So thus was born this notion of Alurx, this idea that we would have a platform where you could get on it and eventually have behavior modification, education, a way to talk to somebody every day about your plan, and then improve over time. Yeah. Not overnight. I'm not a big believer in that. And yes, there's some work that we can do to keep you, excited about being on the app every day, but make no mistake about it, right? It's whether it's your vitamins or whether it's your daily routine, but most importantly, it's lifestyle. It's what do I need to do all the things that are important for me to live a long, healthy life. And that's what I'm working on. That's what it's really all about. And I realized I probably should have done it a long time ago, but it became, I became the advice that I gave to all those folks over the years about here's what you need to do to set it up correctly. Yeah. And luckily for me, I knew what that would be.
Wow. That's awesome. And how did you start to gather your team of scientists and doctors? How did that go?
So the good news is I had a plan. The bad news is, people expect to be paid. I hate that part. I thought they would do it for free, but they all want to get paid. So fundraising, and then obviously one doctor would tell another doctor, or I'd read about somebody who was an expert, a behavioral psychologist, a dermatologist, an internist. So, it was me gathering. I'm still doing that. You will find it interesting that I was recruiting all over the country, but in the end, only women would join. And I think it was because it was minimal money. And it was really that you were making a difference, that you were paying it forward, that instead of seeing 40 patients a week, you could see when we're done with the app, thousands. You could make a difference. And so it's attracting, at least for now, it's been attracting women, medical and expert professionals. It's been really fun. And I have learned, I could spend a whole hour just on sleep, what I've learned. But it really, and then I'm the walking, I'm going to change my lifestyle. So it wasn't really that hard for me to do that, but it was certainly, I have to walk the talk.
Mm-hmm. Was there any product that you were like, you know what, we have to develop this because of my background? Like I've seen so much of this in corporate America and entrepreneurs that they're struggling with. I mean, you already said sleep, because we know that's a big one. Right. So like what was a product inspiration because of your journey?
I know this sounds like corny. I was always taking those huge multivitamins that would get stuck in my throat. So one of the original things was I got to have either a gummy or I got to have, in my case, the effervescent tablet, something that I easily can do every day. That was important to me. And those are, big sellers. But I think the biggest thing is finalizing the app, which should come out, all things fingers crossed, in a couple of months, because that's an opportunity to talk to you every day. It goes into your personal portal, and then we're creating a journey for you that's personalized for you through algorithms. That's been the most exciting part, because that's life-changing. Products are important. I don't mean to downplay them, but the big idea was always an integrated platform and an app where I would literally be with you for the rest of your life.
Yeah, that is so cool. I heard a long time ago, somebody said to me, Julianne, if there's an opportunity that you wish you would have had, go create it for somebody else. Like get out there and do it, create it, and then pay it forward for somebody else. And that's what you're doing. Like you didn't have that person that came alongside of you the whole time. And now you're creating that person to come alongside of them in their journey. That's so cool.
Yeah. The team, my very small, mighty team that I have on staff, because this is global world headquarters here for Alurx at my home. I think all of us believe in this. I don't think you could do this if you didn't believe that you could make a difference.
Mhm.
And I've learned probably more about behavior modification and wellness. I've been on countless seminars learning about, in the next 20 years, there will not be enough health professionals to take care of people in their home. We're going to have to go to a plan B. And so this whole notion of people are living longer. How do we keep them healthy while living longer?
Yeah.
What kinds of things do we need to do? And part of this is about a lifestyle. This isn't a cult. This isn't a training mechanism. This is a lifestyle that says you're going to think differently. But how you eat, how you exercise, how you sleep, how you hydrate, how you take care of yourself. And by the way, although we haven't mentioned it today, this is mental as well. What is the mental health, and what kinds of things can we do? Which, when you were introducing me, you were talking about Seek Her. That's that whole notion of making certain we join forces in the community with people who are helping for mental illness and taking good care of your mental health. But I couldn't be, people always say, do you miss the restaurant business? And I said, no, I'm still a guest and a customer, and I still can enjoy a good constructive feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's great. So, okay, you've talked about kind of like the environment that you've created now within your body with these products and this really soul journey that you're helping these people come along, which is just, it's blowing my mind right now. It's so amazing. We'll talk about the actual environment and the social aspect and what's happening there.
From a social perspective, you mean in terms of the app, or you mean
just in your reach and how you're doing all of that? Yeah.
So it's been really interesting. I think my greatest fear was that people over 50 or 60 wouldn't enjoy the app. Like they wouldn't, wouldn't find that. And that's not been the case. The sweet spot for us, people in their 20s tell us they're not interested. They're going to live for the rest of their lives. So they don't really need the app or any help. When you get past 20 and you get from, really our target is in that sweet spot of 40, 50, but really from 30 to 75 or 80, it's a pretty wide swath of people who are interested. And some people need the influencer, some people need Facebook, some people need, everybody needs a different way to communicate. But no matter, this notion that we're creating this integrated app has attracted sort of near and far from a customer perspective. And then I'm now starting to hear different people, like insurance companies, have started reaching out to me saying, so I could buy this and it could help all of our customers who get, instead of, in other words, this is a change in behavior. So we're finding it kind of coming from all different aspects, but obviously we're in the testing phase now, but couldn't be more excited about what that potential can be to really have an impact.
That's awesome. And this team that you're now creating, you said, is it all women or is it mostly women?
So my team is made up of largely women and people of color. However, I do have some men, and the app developers is a group of men, but they are clearly enlightened and are thrilled to be able to work with us. But again, I think what matters here is that you share this notion of we're in this together, we're in this to win, we're being a team. There's no gamesmanship there, those kinds of things. Interestingly enough, the whole team has worked in corporate America, but they've all chosen to get out of corporate America.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting. I didn't do that intentionally, but it is looking for people who are okay with, we're kind of scrappy here. And so if you're not scrappy,
I love that. Well, and again, your life has taught you that being scrappy serves you well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So that doesn't change now. Some Diane asked, will the app be available for individuals to download from the App Store?
Yes, just not today. Hopefully, fingers crossed, as soon as we get the rest of the funding. Funding has been, an interesting avenue. But yes, it'll be available through the App Store. Alurx will be the name. All of that is set up. It's just finalizing. The app requires a little bit more funding, but we'll get there. I'm not worried.
Yeah.
I told you, I don't give up, so I'm not worried.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. We can hold her to it. It's going to happen. I love that. So what do you do on a daily? Like, how do you continue to keep pouring into yourself? Oftentimes when I'm talking to women, they're like, I feel burnt out. I can't motivate myself anymore. Like, what is your advice to those women of it's not just motivation you need. Like, you got to rely on something a little deeper.
So I feel like I'm now giving the speech from the Academy Awards last night. Don't let anybody tell you that you're past your prime. So love that. I think part of this is I really believe in what I'm doing, and I will be involved in it for the rest of my life. So that's a very important thing for me to pay it forward and give it back. And when I get an email or a letter from a customer saying you changed my life, I mean, that's about as good as it gets. Yeah. For me personally, it's more mental. I have to start every day by exercising. So I know that sounds kooky, but I do exercise every morning. If I'm in town, if I'm out of town, I do, whether it's stretching. I'm a big believer in stretching. That's how more people get aches and pains, because they're not stretching every morning. So I believe in stretching. I believe in exercising, and I can't do the same thing every day, and shouldn't, by the way. You shouldn't do the same thing every day. So I change it up. I do believe in, I take an effervescent tablet every day instead of those awful big pills, which gives you nutrients and gets your body going. And then I'm pretty religious about what I eat, because I want what goes in my body to really have an impact. Yeah. And for me, all of that sort of helps. Now, having said that, let's talk about when it doesn't go so smoothly. So when it's not.
We're gonna have real talk right now.
Yeah. So when it's and I do have either those days or those moments, and I've learned the biggest thing I can do, and I know that people think, oh yeah, right. But I get up and I take a walk. And I clear my head, I breathe. Breathing and stretching releases so much tension. I don't think most people realize that. And I've been taught that early on, that really does make a difference. And sometimes I need a moment of gratitude. And so I'm one of those people. I'm the old-fashioned kind that writes you notes. And so for friends and family and associates, I write notes, and somehow that moment of gratitude puts everything in perspective. This too shall pass. Yeah. And this moment shall pass, of frustration or, whatever it is. And I think for me, and then it's putting it all in perspective, but sometimes I just need to make a phone call. I need to write a note. I need a moment of gratitude to remind myself just how fortunate I am and how grateful I am for the blessings that I do have and that I've had. And I think sometimes we have a tendency in the moment to forget about that. So that for me, that's the daily routine that works best for me.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that so much. I talk about eating a gratitude sandwich. I start out with gratitude and intention, and then I close with gratitude. Like, that's my sandwich for my morning.
I think, when my kids were younger, that was easier said than done. There was a lot of stress and pressure on any given day. Mm-hmm. And that could be, and even then, even in the moment, I would just learn to take a deep breath, pause, and sometimes even walk away just for a moment. And I think to this day, the kids know when mom walks away for a minute, or in the old days, I think I put myself in the laundry room because it was the safest place to be with the door closed, and just take a moment. They literally would say, and they were very young, they would say, "Mom's taking a moment."
I love it.
Moms
need a moment. We do. Okay. Are you open for a few questions that we've gathered?
Okay.
Awesome. Okay. This one is from Laura. How did you maintain confidence when you had moments of being derailed by others?
Boy, Laura, great question. Happened a lot. Mm-hmm. At some point I had to have a bit of a tough skin. There were many moments, largely men, but sometimes women, who would want to derail, who liked derailing, who took joy in it. And I would have to remind myself, that's about you, not me. That's on you, not me. And I can't take it personally. And I have to move on, be the bigger person, even though sometimes it didn't feel right. and just try to find a win-win, because especially in corporate America, because at the end of the day, he or she's not going anywhere. So I got to find a way to, again, I used to always say to people, you don't have to like me, you have to respect me. There's a big difference.
There is a difference.
And too many of us want to be liked all the time. Just respect me and treat me with dignity. But I would have to not take it personally, and I would have to swallow sometimes a little bit of, ego and pride, and find a win-win.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
But a great question. Not easy.
Yeah, that was good, Laura. It goes into Carly's question, because you talked a little bit about what you do, on the daily for your self-care. And then she asked, how do you maintain boundaries?
Well, that's a great question. These are great questions.
She locks herself in the laundry room. That's how she maintains boundaries.
Occasionally still do that today, truth be told.
That's a hot tip there.
That one is easy for me. I made a lot of mistakes early on. And, I mentioned it early on that I had a style that was very much, I was all in, and I was caring. And, sometimes people took advantage of that and overstepped their boundaries. And I think with a couple of those in my background and in my memory, I learned, Julia, if you don't establish boundaries, people will run you over. Sure. And so early on, I had to, not early on, but probably by the time I was a vice president or even a director, I had to learn to say, I'm going to set some boundaries here. I don't leave you an email at 11:30 at night. I'm not calling you at 11:30 at night. I would like that same respect. Yeah. So I would have to say things that made me uncomfortable, but, and even today, right? And I come from a different world. So, if you call me or you write me, unless you're cold calling, I respond to you within 24 hours. I was trained that way. That's the way I grew up. I unfortunately, America, because of the way things have gone, doesn't just do that. So I think you didn't ask this, but I would tell you, I think the biggest learning has partly to do with entrepreneurialism. And so you're small, and partly to do with this ghosting thing where people just don't return your call or I absolutely. So I just keep doing what I do, and I don't let it bother me that there are just some people who ghost. I never heard of such a thing. I didn't grow up that way. I didn't raise my kids that way.
It shouldn't be a thing, Julia. It shouldn't be a thing.
But I don't take it personally. I rise above it. I'll write another email saying, and sometimes I will get, oh gosh, you ended up in my junk mail. Okay. All right. I'll buy it. I ended up in your junk mail. So are we meeting this week?
Right.
So anyway, I think part of it is there is a little bit of asking and recognizing there's a school of hard knocks. Eventually you'll find what's right for you, that balance. And you'll have to tell people what that balance is.
Yeah.
And the balance.
Oh, I love that. Let's do one more. Okay. Narissa asked, do you find that the higher up you go, the further away from knowing the day-to-day truths? Like, what was that journey like for you?
These are great questions.
Great questions, aren't they?
Great questions. The truth of the matter is, it's up to you. So yes, you're absolutely right. The higher you go, people want to protect the CEO. We don't need to bother Julia with any of that. But when I ask a question, my expectation is somebody on the team can go deep if need to be. And I would periodically remind people, part of your KPI, part of your accountability is you got to know this. You're the expert. So make no mistake about it. I may not be asking you daily for the tracking or weekly for the tracking, but my expectation, whether it's tracking or the numbers or whatever it was, that you know it like the back of your hand. If you're the HR person, you know the culture of this company. You know what the water cooler talk is. If you're head of legal, you know where our risk is. My expectation, and I would have these conversations all the time. Maybe I don't know every level of detail, but make no mistake about it, I'm ultimately accountable. And therefore, I used to always say the same thing, especially my CFO. I don't look good in orange, and I'm not going to jail. I hate bunk beds. So let's make certain we all get it right. We all know what it is, and it's belt and suspenders, ladies and gentlemen. And if you create that culture, people will follow.
Oh, that's so good. I mean, I don't know if we can top that. That was such a good, my Mic drop moment. That was so good. Julia, thank you so much for being with us and your time and to share your journey with us. Who here? Let's show Julia some love. That's incredible. Let's show her some love. Thank you so much. Is there any last piece of advice that you would give to the woman who's like nervous, wants to take the next big step, but just kind of questioning herself? What piece of advice would you give to her?
I don't think it's all about corporate America. There are many people who are successful outside of corporate America. So be careful with that notion that you have to live the dream. I've coached many a person. You don't belong in corporate America. You belong in an entrepreneurial environment, whether it's a startup or a smaller company. It's just not for everybody. Don't sell your soul to work for anybody. You have to be who you are. And if you aren't, you're working for the wrong group of people or company. I have very strong feelings about that. So be brave, be successful, make us all proud. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Have a good day. Thank you,
You
Julia.
too. Thank you.